This happened last year. I was 32 and spent most of my evenings in my cramped apartment, buried in books and websites about space. I followed every little piece of news about Mars, hoping to inspire my students with the wonders of the universe. I never thought it would lead me to this. One night, I was on my usual space news site. It was quiet, just me and my computer screen. Then I stumbled upon a livestream from NASA. They were talking about this unusual pyramid-like structure on Mars. At first, they brushed it off as just another geological formation. I thought, no way. Something clicked in my mind, and I started digging into it. As the days passed, I dove deeper into the rabbit hole. I read posts and theories from other enthusiasts. My heart raced with excitement. Maybe this pyramid held a secret that could change everything. I spent late nights on forums. I even connected with others who shared my obsession. Each article and post brought something new. I couldn't get enough of it. But then things started getting weird. I began receiving strange messages from a user named Redshift. They warned me to stop looking into the pyramid, but I ignored them. I thought they were just trying to scare me. I felt like I was onto something big. Soon after, little things began to happen. My notes would go missing only to reappear in odd places. I'd hear whispering sounds at night. I thought it was my imagination or the wind. Maybe it was just the combination of stress and caffeine. I shrugged it off, but the uneasy feeling lingered. One night around 2 a.m., I was scrolling through more articles and my phone buzzed. It was a message from Redshift again. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Stop now." My heart raced. I didn't reply. I wanted the truth, whatever the cost. The very next day, I came home to find my apartment in disarray. Papers were scattered across the floor. My heart pounded loudly. I desperately looked for the reports I had written about the pyramid. They were gone. I swore I had left them on the table. The air felt thick and all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. Then as I picked up some papers, a shadow flickered in my peripheral vision. I turned to check. It was nothing. Just my mind playing tricks again, right? I tried to convince myself, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't subside. That's when I noticed a reflection in the window. It wasn't just me. I saw something moving behind me. I felt cold terror grab my heart. But when I turned around, the room was empty. I didn't know what I was chasing anymore. The truth or the fear of it. Maybe I had crossed some line I shouldn't have. But I still couldn't shake off the feeling that the pyramid on Mars was just the beginning of something much darker. I need to stop. But I think I might already be too far gone. The next morning I woke up anxious. I looked around my apartment hoping to find something familiar. Instead, it felt eerie. Like I was living in someone else's life. I shoved the thoughts aside and went to work, trying to focus on my students. They were eager, ready to soak up knowledge about the universe, but I found it hard. My mind kept wandering back to the pyramid. After school, I met up with some fellow astronomy enthusiasts at a cafe. They were buzzing with excitement about the recent discoveries on Mars. I pretended to share their enthusiasm, but inside, I was restless. I needed answers. I decided to confide in one of them, Sarah, a longtime friend in the space community. "Have you heard about the pyramid?" I asked, my voice lowering as I leaned in. Her eyes sparkled with interest. "Yeah, what do you think? It's probably just a trick of light." "No, I mean, what if it's something more? I have been looking into it. But things have gotten strange for me," I admitted, hesitating. "What kind of strange?" she asked with concern. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again, cutting through the conversation. It was another message from Redshift. "You should have listened. It's not too late to turn back." A chill ran down my spine. The words felt urgent, pressing. I glanced at Sarah, who had noticed my reaction. I showed her the message and her face paled. "Is this a joke?" she asked, trying to laugh it off, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "No joke. And I think someone might be watching me." I fidgeted with my hands, feeling the weight of my paranoia. "I think we need to go check this out. If you're serious, we shouldn't wait any longer," Sarah said. She wasn't backing down. I hesitated but nodded, feeling a mix of fear and relief. At least I wouldn't be alone in this. We agreed to meet at my place later that night to dig deeper into the data, hoping to uncover something significant. As night fell, a storm rolled in, pouring rain against my windows. It felt like nature was echoing my inner turmoil. When Sarah arrived, I was already agitated. We spread out my notes, the few I could find, and my computer screen flickered with images of the pyramid from various angles. The more we discussed, the more alive my obsession felt. But then, as we studied the images, something strange happened. A shadow moved behind Sarah. I blinked, and she turned to look, eyes wide. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "Yeah." But when I searched the room, it was empty. My heart raced. "Maybe we should call it a night," Sarah suggested, her voice shaky. But just as we decided to wrap things up, the lights flickered violently, plunging us into darkness for a split second. Someone had cut the power. Then it hit me. I was supposed to feel safe here, but now I felt trapped. "Let's get out of here," I said, adrenaline fueling my panic. We stumbled to the door, but as I reached for the handle, I froze. There was a figure standing outside, barely visible through the storm. Fear pooled in my stomach as realization struck. This was no ordinary visitor, and I had a feeling I was about to find out just how deep the secret of the pyramid went. As I stood there staring at the shadowy figure, a flood of adrenaline coursed through me. My grip tightened around the doorknob. I felt Sarah draw closer, her breath quickening beside me. Who is it?" she whispered, the slightest tremor in her voice. I could barely think, each pulse of my heart drumming louder than the last. I squinted through the rain, desperate to make out the person standing on my porch. The figure was cloaked in darkness, the pounding rain against the ground barely muffling the sound of heavy breathing. A flicker of lightning illuminated their silhouette, a hooded coat, face obscured. I took a cautious step back, urging Sarah to do the same. "Should we call the police?" she suggested, her voice trembling. I shook my head, trying to make sense of the fear constricting my chest. "If this is tied to the pyramid, we need to handle this ourselves." Just as I spoke, the figure shifted. My heart raced as they stepped closer, their gaze locked on me even from behind the fabric of the hood. There was something haunting in their stance, as if they were waiting for me to make the next move. I felt exposed, like my every thought was laid bare. "Who are you?" I finally called out, trying to project confidence. "It's not safe," the figure rasped, their voice eerily calm against the backdrop of storm. "You need to understand what you've stumbled into." "Stumbled into what?" I shot back, my anxiety morphing into indignation. Who did this person think they were? Who sent you? But the figure gave no answer. Instead, they gestured toward the ground with a gloved hand, eyes still hidden. My curiosity battled with my fear. "Please, just talk to us," Sarah pleaded, stepping forward. The figure regarded her momentarily, a pause that felt loaded with intent. "I can help you," they said, lowering their hood slightly. A face emerged from the shadows, familiar yet foreign. It was a person I had collaborated with years ago on minor projects, someone who had vanished inexplicably from the scene. "What happened to you?" I blurted, my relief disabling my instinct to be afraid. "I thought you were gone." "I was never gone," the figure replied. "But it's too late for that now. You're in danger. The pyramid, it's not just a structure, it's a key." "A key to what?" I interrupted, the weight of their words pressing against my chest. "Take me to your computer. I can explain everything," they insisted, glancing nervously back toward the street. The urgency in their eyes stirred my trust, however fleeting. "What about the power? What do we do about—" "I'll deal with that." They glanced toward the back of my building. "Now hurry!" Sarah and I exchanged a look. There was no time to weigh options. We stepped back inside, and I gestured for the figure to follow me, my heart thumping in my ears. Just as we crossed the threshold, the wind howled outside, the rain slamming against the windows like an angry fist. I felt the weight of the unknown knotting my stomach. As I reached the room, I flipped on my desk lamp, casting an unsteady light around the space. My computer blinked back at me, but I hesitated before turning it on. "You mentioned a key. What do you mean?" Just trust me, the figure urged, a fierce intensity igniting their expression. We don't have much time. My palms were clammy as I sat down at the desk. Before I could click on the machine, the power surged back. The lights blared back to life as if confident the darkness was gone for good. But then came a sound. A distinct thud outside that made my blood run cold. Everything shifted in an instant. Even as I prepared to uncover the answers I sought, I realized we had just let in a new layer of danger into this stormy night. I barely had time to process that thud when the figure shot a nervous glance over their shoulder. "We need to move," they urged again, the urgency rising in their voice. I turned to Sarah, who looked just as bewildered as I felt. "What do you want us to do?" I asked the figure, my mind racing with mixed thoughts of curiosity and fear. "Lock the door," came the firm command, and I obeyed without thinking. The click echoed in the tension-filled room as I grabbed my phone from the table just in case. I could still hear the rain battering against the windows, drowning out the normal sounds of night. As I returned to my desk, the figure leaned closer. What we're talking about, it's bigger than you can imagine. The pyramid isn't a relic, it's active. It can transmit information, and there are people who want to control that power." "Transmit information?" I echoed. I was stumbling through this strange territory, trying to grasp the reality we faced. "But why us? Why now?" The figure glanced at Sarah, then back at me. "Because you're the only ones who have the key to access it, your research, your discoveries. They think you can help unlock it." "What do you mean?" I stammered. I was still floundering, but I sensed the urgency radiating from our guest. "How do we unlock anything? We didn't even know what we were looking at." "Yes, you did," they hissed, frustration leaking through. "You just didn't understand the implications. Every paper you filed, every analysis, it's all part of a bigger picture. You're intertwined with this." Suddenly, another loud thud came from outside, closer this time, accompanied by a series of rapid footsteps. My heartbeat quickened as I instinctively reached for Sarah's hand. "Should we call the police?" I whispered. "Forget the police," our guest snapped. "They won't get here in time. They're the least of your worries right now." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, the weight of panic settling in. "Who's out there?" "They're after the pyramid," the figure said, lowering their voice. "And they know you're involved. This isn't just about information, it's about power, control over everything. If they find you, if they find that computer, we're all done for." I swallowed hard, breath hitching in my throat as the reality settled. I went to switch on my computer, but the screen flickered, and then went dark. "Damn it, what's wrong?" "Just stay quiet," the figure whispered, their eyes darting to the door. "I'll deal with it." Before I could protest, they slipped through the doorway and moved cautiously toward the back of the building, blending into the shadows. Just then, a booming bang resonated through the entrance, making me flinch. That's when I saw it, a shadow looming in the rain-soaked glass of the door, an outline of someone, or something, determined to get inside. I pulled Sarah closer, my heart hammering wildly. This was no longer a simple mystery. It was a fight for our lives. And as that figure outside started to pound on the door, I realized we were stranded at the edge of something much darker than I had ever anticipated. I held my breath, forcing myself to quiet my racing thoughts. The pounding on the door grew louder, and I could feel the vibrations in my chest. "What do we do?" I whispered to Sarah, my voice trembling. "We wait for whoever that is," she replied, eyes wide. I shook my head. "We can't just sit here. We need to find a way out. What if they get in?" Sarah took a step back, her panic clawing at the edges of her composure. "And if we leave, what if we run right into whoever that is?" I looked around the dim room, seeing nothing but the shadows cast by the flickering light of my computer, the one that was now dead. There had to be some way to escape. My eyes fell on the window, partially obscured by the rain. It led to the alley behind the building. "Sarah, the window," I said, pointing. "We can climb out and find help." She hesitated, glancing back at the door where the pounding had abruptly ceased. "What if that's a trap?" Before I could respond, I heard a different sound, a shuffle on the other side of the door. It was as if someone had shifted their weight, getting into position. My heart sank. "Let's go," I urged, moving toward the window, urgency overriding my fear. But just as I stepped forward, the door jerked violently, rattling against the frame. "Stay back!" I shouted as my pulse raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But instead of retreating, I felt a surge of instinct mixing with panic. I grasped the window, threw it open, and the frigid air sliced through me. "Help me!" I urged Sarah, but she remained frozen, her face pale. The pounding resumed, fueled by desperation. "We don't have time!" Just as I started to climb through, a loud crash echoed from the door. I turned in horror to see the figure, our mysterious guest, bursting back into the room, their face flushed with urgency. "Go, now!" Behind them, the door splintered as something powerful forced its way inside. I didn't look back, pulling myself through the window. The cold rain hit my skin like needles as I dropped onto the damp ground below. "Sarah!" I yelled, looking back up at the window. I could just see her silhouette. "Jump! We have to go!" With a frantic nod, she threw herself forward, landing awkwardly beside me. We barely had a moment to breathe when the figure emerged from the window, their face twisted in fear. "Run!" I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted down the alley, the rain soaking through my clothes as I glanced back toward the building. The shadow was there now, pushing through the doorway, a hulking darkness against the light. "Where now?" Sarah panted, glancing over her shoulder, fear etched on her face. "We can't just run into the dark." "There's a street around the corner. We'll figure it out there." But I knew I was talking more to reassure myself than to provide real answers. What was happening? Who were these people? What did they want with us? My heart thudded with every step as we turned the corner. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light, a car's headlights cutting through the rain. I immediately felt a sense of dread. What if it's them? "Then we'll find another way," Sarah said, determined. But just as we made a move toward the light, a sharp voice called out from the shadows behind us. "Stop! You're not getting away that easily." Fear surged within me again, even worse than before. My eyes widened as I recognized the voice. I froze, realizing who it belonged to. I turned slowly, the rain slicking my hair against my forehead. "No," I whispered under my breath. It was Peter. The same guy from the party last week, the one who had been acting strange. I thought I had seen him slip away with that group. What on earth was he doing here now? "Turn around," he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "You two are in over your heads." I felt Sarah shuffle closer to me, her hand gripping my arm. "What do you want, Peter?" I asked, trying to sound bolder than I felt. My heart raced, and I could barely hear the rain over the pounding in my ears. He stepped into the light of the car's headlights, and I could see his face twisted into a sort of grim grin. "It's not what I want. It's what you both have stumbled into," he replied, his words dripping with menace. Before I could respond, he flicked his gaze past us, his grin faltering for a moment. "They're coming. You have to come with me now." "What? Who's coming?" My voice shook, confusion flooding my mind. I glanced at Sarah, who looked as bewildered as I felt. "Do we trust him?" she whispered, eyes darting between me and Peter. I felt no certainty in my answer. "I don't think we have many options," I replied hesitantly. Peter shoved his hands into his pockets and leaned closer. "Whatever you think is going on, it's worse than you imagine. That thing you saw." He gestured back toward the building, his expression grave. "You need to understand, there are people who want it for themselves, people who won't stop until they get it." "Get what?" I was growing frustrated, a knot tightening in my stomach. "The data, the information you two accidentally uncovered," he said, glancing down the alley as if expecting something to leap out. My mind raced. What information? I thought back to the experimental software I'd been working on. The testing. Could that have anything to do with this? "I don't have time to explain," Peter snapped, his eyes wild. "We need to move. Just trust me for once." Before I had a chance to reply, a loud crash erupted from the shadows behind us. I turned, my blood running cold as I saw the silhouette of a figure emerging, moving with purpose. The darkness seemed to swallow the alley, blending shadows into one looming threat. "We have to run," I shouted, gripping Sarah's arm tightly. Peter looked at us, desperation flickering in his eyes. "This way." He took off down the alley, and I followed without thinking. The pounding of my heart matched the sound of our hurried footsteps. As we rounded a corner, I glanced back. I could see movement, shadows shifting against the dim glow of streetlights. My stomach churned with dread. "Are they after us?" "The people behind this, they're relentless," Peter said, his breath coming in quick gasps. "And you two are the key." "Key to what?" I yelled, trying to keep pace. My mind was racing, questions swirling around me. But before he could answer, we stumbled into an open area, a parking lot flooded with light. That's when it hit me. I found myself at the front of a parked van, a sense of hope fleetingly washing over me. We could escape. "Get in!" Peter shouted, moving to the passenger side as I yanked the door open. But as I did, the weight of dread settled back into my chest. I saw a shadow growing, merging from the darkness behind the building. Something terrible was coming, and it was closer than I wanted to believe. I dove into the van, slamming the door just as I heard the sound of heavy footsteps behind us. My heart raced as I fumbled to buckle the seatbelt. The van's interior felt cramped and suffocating, but I had no time to complain. I looked over at Peter as he frantically scanned the parking lot. "Start it," I urged, my voice barely above a whisper. With a quick glance at the rearview mirror, Peter twisted the key in the ignition. The roar of the engine shattered the silence, and I felt a jolt of adrenaline course through me. But even as the sound echoed, I heard something else. Voices, muffled and distant but growing closer. "Who are they?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I could see her knuckles turning white as she gripped the armrest. "People who want what you found," Peter stated flatly, his eyes darting between the mirror and the parking lot entrance. "They'll do whatever it takes to get it back." "What did we find?" I demanded, my mind spiraling. I could feel panic rising in my chest, a fierce need to understand. Peter's gaze was locked on the entrance, visibly tense. "If I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Just know it's bigger than anything you can imagine." Sudden movement outside brought me back to reality. A dark figure stepped into the light, and I gasped when I recognized the familiar silhouette. It was one of the men from the party, the one who had been watching me. "Drive! Now!" I shouted, my instincts screaming at me to get out of there. Peter didn't hesitate. He slammed the gear into drive and the tires screeched as we lurched forward. The figure in the rearview mirror vanished into the shadows, but not before I caught a glimmer of something in his hand, metallic and angular. "What do they want with the data?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as we sped away from the parking lot. "What's so important?" "It's not just data. It's what it can do. The implications—" Peter began, but he was cut off by a heavy thud. My stomach dropped. "Did you feel that?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "Just keep driving," I yelled, but Peter's hands were shaking on the wheel. The tension was thick, and I could see fear etched in his face. As we turned onto a main road, I glanced back, hoping we were in the clear. That's when I saw it. A dark SUV speeding after us, its headlights cutting through the night like a predator on our tail. "They won't give up," Peter warned, his voice low and urgent. "Great, just what we need," I muttered. My pulse pounded in my ears as uncertainty clawed at my mind. How had we gotten tangled in this? Suddenly, a flash caught my eye. I turned to the window and saw a beam of light pulse from the SUV, illuminating the street in a bizarre dance of shadow and light. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the engine's roar. "I don't know," I admitted. My gut twisted with a sense that whatever was happening behind us was just the beginning. "We need to lose them now," Peter said, desperation lacing his tone. But where could we go? I scanned the empty roads ahead, searching for a way out. Then everything went dark. The headlights flickered and died, leaving us in a haze of shadows. the SUV still hot on our heels. "Peter!" I shouted, panic flooding my voice. "I'm trying," he responded, slamming the steering wheel. That's when I heard the sound, a chilling, mechanical whirring echoing from above. My heart dropped. Something else was here, and this time, I wasn't sure we could escape. The darkness enveloped us, thick and suffocating. I could barely see anything beyond the van's windshield. My heart raced as I tried to process the chilling whirring that grew louder, reverberating through the metal walls of the vehicle. "Peter, what's happening?" I shouted, desperately feeling for any hint of reassurance in his expression. His hands were trembling on the steering wheel. "It's the lights," he said, voice nearly breaking. They're messing with everything." "Messing with what?" I demanded, frustration rising in my chest. And then the whirring shifted into something else. A loud crack, like thunder breaking the stillness. I flinched, glancing around for an exit. The SUV was still behind us, relentless. "We can't keep going like this." Sarah's panic echoed my own as she looked from one of us to the other. "We need a plan." Peter's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "There's an alley up ahead. I'll try to cut through." The alley loomed closer, a narrow path between two buildings. He jerked the wheel, and the van careened into it, tires screeching. The shadows around us began to blend together as the world narrowed. I gripped the seat, breath held tight, hoping that we could lose them. "Stay quiet," Peter ordered, his voice rigid. We flew deeper into the alley, the walls closing in, and the whirring above began to fade. But our moment of relief was cut short when a sharp crack pierced the air, followed by a blinding flash. "What was that?" I gasped, squinting against the light. "Something from the SUV," Peter said, his voice low. "They're attacking us." Suddenly the van jolted violently, a collision with what felt like debris. I glanced over to see a large crate topple onto the road. "They're blocking the exit," I shouted. "Hold on," Peter shouted, veering away from the piled crates. The van lurched, and for a moment I thought we might tip over. "I can't breathe," Sarah whispered, and I shot her a glance, heart sinking. "Just focus," I said firmly. "We're not done yet." The van shuddered as Peter punched the gas, the tires spinning briefly before gaining traction again. We barreled forward, but the alley was tight, and the looming walls around us felt like a trap closing in. That's when the sound turned softer, like a voice echoing through the night. "We have to move, they found us." I didn't understand. There were no safety features in this alley, nothing but darkened corners and shadows. "Just a little further," Peter yelled, urging the vehicle onward, but then the whirring came back. Closer, sharper. I leaned closer to the window, squinting through the dim light. Something flickered above, a drone. It was following us, fast, and it looked menacing. Suddenly, a small explosion rattled the van's windows, sending a shudder through my bones. I screamed, instinctively ducking. Fragments of debris rained down, bouncing off the roof. "Peter, we need to get out of here," I shouted again, points of fear being replaced by a desperate determination. "It's blocking the way out," he said, voice strained. "But there's a door on the left. We can take a chance." A heavy thud followed the explosion, and I felt a surge of dread. Panic washed over me once more. What if it's locked? "We won't know until we try," Peter said, eyes fierce with resolve. The alley twisted ahead, and as I scrambled forward I saw the door. It was slightly ajar. "Go," I urged as we raced toward it, the van tearing through the shadows. But the drone was quick, its blinking light closing in. I could hear the whirring again, more menacing this time. We needed that door open before it was too late. "Now," Peter yelled, and I lunged for the handle. I pulled it hard, praying it wouldn't be stuck. As the door flew open and we rushed through, the looming drone cast a shadow, diving down toward us. It was now or never. I stumbled through the doorway, my legs feeling like jelly. The moment we crossed the threshold, the sounds of the alley faded into an eerie silence. I turned back just in time to see the drone hover above the van, its lights blinking furiously. It seemed disoriented, unable to follow us inside. "Are we safe?" Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. Peter panted next to me. I don't know yet. Just give me a second. The space we found ourselves in was dark and cramped. A warehouse, it looked like. Boxes stacked high, shadows lurking in every corner. I squinted, trying to catch my breath while scanning for any possible exits. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint rolling of the drone's engines. Where do we go from here? I asked, urgency creeping back into my voice. Follow me, Peter replied, moving toward a row of crates. I glanced at Sarah, who looked pale. You okay? She nodded but didn't speak. Instead, she clutched at her side. We huddled behind a stack of boxes, pressing our backs against the cold metal as we listened. The whirring noise from outside was replaced by a different sound, like footsteps, muffled against concrete. Something shifted in the shadows. I squinted harder, and that's when I saw it. A flicker of movement, followed by a figure emerging from the darkness. Dressed in black, they seemed to glide between the crates, surveying everything with a practiced ease. Who is that? I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. Should we move? Sarah's voice trembled. No, Peter replied, eyes fixed on the figure. We need to stay hidden. The figure moved closer. My heart pounded as panic gripped me. I wanted to bolt, to scream, but I forced myself to breathe. They stopped just short of our hiding spot, checking their surroundings. A moment stretched on, stretching my nerves taut. Then, as if sensing us, they turned sharply, eyes scanning the area. I froze, not daring to make a sound. The figure pulled something from their belt, a device that gleamed ominously in the dim light. At that moment, a loud crash echoed from the front of the warehouse, and the figure jumped, rushing toward the noise. We all flinched. There has to be another way out, I said, breaking the silence. Peter nodded, still focused on where the figure had disappeared. Let's move while we can, he decided, already stepping away from the crates. We crept forward, careful not to draw attention. We made our way through the maze of boxes, the urgency driving us. I could hear mutters now, low and harsh. Whoever was in here was getting closer. That's when I spotted something shiny on the ground. Wait, I said, kneeling to pick it up. It was a small device glowing with strange symbols. What is this? I murmured, turning it over in my hands. More of their tech, I guess, Peter replied. But as I stared at it, a chill ran through me. I remembered the drone. Its purpose. Then it's not just a drone, I realized, dread pooling once more. They're tracking us. Before I could process more, a loud bang reverberated through the space. The heavy door at the front burst open, light pouring in. Get back! A voice shouted, but it wasn't ours. Panic surged anew, and I turned to run. But as I did, I saw the figure again, this time standing right behind us. Their face was obscured, but I could feel the smirk through their predatory stance. I was trapped. I stumbled backward, panic surging through me. The figure was relentless, blocking our exit with a calculated calmness. I glanced at Peter and Sarah, both frozen beside me, fear etched into their faces. Run! Peter shouted, snapping us out of our shock. Without thinking, we bolted deeper into the warehouse, hearts racing as we dashed past stacks of boxes and crates looming like sentinels in the dim light. The figure pursued us, but the maze of the warehouse offered some cover. We ducked behind a pile of storage containers, our breath heavy and ragged. What do we do? I whispered, glancing at Peter. We need to find a way out. Somewhere safe. He scanned the surroundings, eyes flickering with urgency. There's usually an exit at the back of these places. Just follow me. I nodded, resolute but anxious. What about the others? Do you think they're after them too? Right now we need to think only of ourselves, he replied tersely, clenched fists shaking at his sides. We made our way cautiously toward the far end of the warehouse, maneuvering through tight spaces and around obstacles. The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, getting closer with each passing moment. I could practically feel the weight of the figure's intent as they hunted for us. Here, there's a door, Sarah whispered, pointing toward a faint outline at the end of the gloomy corridor. It lay partially ajar, offering a glimmer of hope. We sprinted toward it, adrenaline pushing us forward. As we reached the door, I hesitated. What if it's a trap? But there wasn't time to weigh our options. I pushed the door open and stepped through. We emerged into the night air, rain still pouring down, the cold biting through my clothes. For a moment I felt liberated, until I noticed the dark SUV parked just a few feet away, its engine running ominously. My gut churned at the sight. "We can't go back in there, what do we do?" I shouted. Fear surged again. Time felt like a ticking clock. "Into the trees!" Peter urged, his eyes darting around as if sensing danger. Without a second thought, we bolted toward the dense cover of trees lining the yard, each step heavy with tension. We raced into the thicket, branches scratching at our skin, hearts thumping in sync. I could hear the SUV door slam behind us, and the angry shout of an unfamiliar voice echoed through the forest. "Go! Keep moving!" I urged, trying to drown out the fear clawing at my chest. I could barely see where we were going. The only sounds were our footsteps on mulch and the thunder of my racing heart. Suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my side as I collided with something solid. I looked up to find a low stone wall tangling with shadows. "We can hide!" I shouted, barely waiting for the others to catch up before we dove behind it. Huddled together, we stilled our breathing, eyes wide with fear as we listened to the sounds outside. I could hear conversations and footsteps, voices laced with frustration and urgency. "There!" a voice yelled. I instinctively held my breath, fingers gripping the rough stone as I leaned closer to hear. They went this way. A chill rush ran down my spine as panic filled me. They were closer than I anticipated, their desperation palpable. But then I thought about the device I found. That symbol, I whispered to the others. What if it can help us? What if we can broadcast something to draw their attention away? What? Sarah asked, brows drawn together in confusion. Listen, I began. If we can cause a distraction, maybe we could slip away. Find help. Peter's face twisted in thought. What kind of distraction? I looked back towards the device, realizing how little time we had left. Maybe we can trigger it to broadcast a signal somewhere far off. We just need to figure out how. My mind raced, thinking of possibilities. The footsteps outside were growing distant, almost imperceptibly. We don't have much time, Peter said, urgency creeping into his voice. We need to act fast. I pulled the device from my pocket, holding it close. You think it'll work? I asked hesitantly. If it's what I think it is, there's only one way to find out, Peter replied, determination etching every word. I glanced at Sarah, who nodded as if to say she was willing to take that leap with me. Okay, let's try it, I said, feeling somewhat hopeful despite lingering doubt. With shaky hands, I pressed the device together, focusing on the symbols swirling around its surface. Suddenly, the device hummed, and the symbols glowed with an intensity I hadn't expected. It's working, I exclaimed, but my excitement was quickly tempered by the urgent need to keep moving. Come on, let's go, Peter said, guiding us back to the edge of the wall, eyes wide and alert. As we crept along the shadows, leaving our hiding place, I couldn't help but notice the tension thickening the air. The sense of urgency was palpable. Every second counted. Just then, a piercing sound cut through the night. A loud alarm echoed from the direction of the SUV, followed by frantic shouting. They were diverted, and we had a chance. Now, I urged, taking off into the darkness toward the thicket. We ran with everything we had left, hearts pounding wildly, adrenaline coursing through our veins. As we made our way deeper into the woods, I could barely digest what was happening. My mind spun in circles, blending what was real and what was ephemeral. What had we stumbled into? What information lay within the depths of that pyramid? Questions lingered in my mind, numbness creeping into my bones. But as we pushed on, I knew one thing for certain. The connection to that pyramid was far stronger than any one of us, and the truth was more complicated than I could ever imagine. After what felt like an eternity of running, we finally emerged onto a road lined with streetlights flickering in the distance. We stopped, panting, looking for any sign of help. I don't know where we are, Sarah said, gazing around warily. Then we'll find our way, Peter said resolutely. But as I glanced back toward the trees, a chill ran through me. In the shadows, something moved. A figure watching us from the darkness, its shape indistinct but strikingly familiar. And even though we escaped, the shadows would follow. I could still hear the whispers of what remained unanswered, lingering in the air. To be continued, I thought, a shiver running down my spine, knowing the truth of the pyramid, and everything connected to it, lingered just beyond reach.